very much for inviting us. And as I mentioned just before some of you came in, the title for the presentation, "Never Laugh at Why Dragons," may be self-evident at the end of the presentation. It's taken from Tolkien's The Hobbit, and I'll explain a little bit more at the very end. Anyway, I'm just going to describe PACE and some of the things we've been doing for the past 20 plus years. So we were created out of legacy systems that have been in place in this area for well over 100 years. There have been suburban transit agencies in the Chicago suburbs since the turn of the 20th century. The West Towns company that was located in Oak Park for many, many years literally had horse-drawn streetcars. And if any of you have been out on West Lake Street, just west of Austin Avenue, there's a nice little shopping center there. There used to be a horse farm, and that's exactly what it was. In addition to that, we had operations up in Waukegan, Elgin, Aurora, Joliet. They were all the municipal operators. And we are still running routes that were at one time operated by streetcars. What I find interesting is that the people who plan for light rail systems today, the people who do transit-oriented development, tell you that you can't really do transit-oriented development unless you have light rail, because bus routes are subject to change. Well, there are some current and former PACE planners here, and they will tell you, and I will show you as we go through this afternoon, changing a bus route is a very, very difficult thing to do. So it becomes quite a challenge. We serve the 6-county suburban area, as well as some of the areas in the city of Chicago, covering approximately 3,600 square miles. There are 32 million fixed route trips, about 199 fixed accessible routes. We have, roughly speaking, 700 buses, and we have about 1.5 million demand response trips. I'll talk a little bit more about demand response in just a minute. PACE is actually the second largest fleet in the United States. Most people don't realize that. We have 229 30-foot buses, 83 35-foot buses, 390 40-foot buses, 442 paratransit vehicles, 796 van pool vans, 97 community transit vehicles. Now, the reason why that's important is because in the suburbs, one size does not fit all. We could not operate a suburban transit system with 40-foot buses or 60-foot buses alone. We have to have a variety of buses because we have to operate with a family of services. And that's the critical part to what you will see as we go through an explanation of how we do service planning for the suburban area. The other important thing for part of the discussion that we're going to talk about today is that there are about 3.7 million ADA trips serving the city of Chicago as well as the suburbs. The Chicago area is unique in this factor. The federal government requires every transit system in the United States to offer what's called complimentary paratransit service. So if a person's disability precludes them from accessing and using fixed route service, the transit system must provide them with an alternative means of making their trip. Not should, not could, must. And so CTA a number of years ago was having difficulty doing this. It was creating a significant problem for them. PACE was not having the same problem. So the state legislature said, effectively, PACE, you will become the operator that will provide all of the paratransit trips, all of the ADA eligible paratransit trips in the 6-county area. RTA, you will fund all of the paratransit trips. You will take the money off the top. So in other words, any disputes between the service boards about funding ADA paratransit service is gone. State law now says ADA service will be funded using will be funded using the money that comes to the transit agencies through various funding means, and it will be paid out by the RTA. Turns out to have been a very wise decision, because one of the things that happened is once we began to start taking phone calls, and once we began to serve the trips the way we were supposed to, we grew to that 3.7 million trips very, very quickly. What we are looking at here is the density of the trips in the density of the area that we are serving. And here you get an idea of how well matched the PACE service routes are. And you can also see, obviously, the city of Chicago stands out on its own. So this is the 2012 population data, and you can see our service area. We go, we serve all 6 counties. You see that we do have fairly heavy service in through Cook County, which you'd expect. And then we have fairly heavy service out in DuPage County. But that service in DuPage County is primarily feeder service. It's service to primarily the BNSF, the big commuter rail, the busiest of the commuter rails coming into Chicago. We have very little north-south service in DuPage County. That's still going to be a significant challenge for us, and we'll show you why now.
Quick question.
Yes.
Yeah, I've looked at this map a number of times during my research, and I've been trying to figure out why there's that gap in southwest Cook County and northwest southwest Lake County, where there seems to be a large population base that is not serviced by PACE.
The biggest reason, there's a lack of funding to provide that service. That's quite simply, and we'll talk about that as we go along. One of the most significant things is that is effectively the funding that was set in 1983 is essentially the formula that was set in 1983 is the formula that is in place today. So 8 cents of every transit dollar, every transit operations dollar in this area comes to PACE. Thus it was in 1983, thus it is today. No change. You can grow the pie all you want. PACE is only going to get 8 cents. That's the formula. 5 cents of every state capital funding dollar, every capital dollar, 5 cents goes to PACE. No more. 8 cents of every federal capital funding dollar goes to PACE. No more. Now, what's interesting is if you go and take a look at the growth of jobs and residences between 1990 and 2010 in the areas you're describing, that's where all the growth was. And yet, PACE did not benefit other than the growth that took place, the percentage growth that took place in the funds, there was that marginal growth. So PACE has been capped in its ability to serve the community, the suburban communities. Now, here is one of the other interesting things that begins to happen. So the percentage of households below poverty in 2000, notice fairly light colors throughout most of the map. Between 2000 and 2010, the city of Chicago begins a fairly aggressive program of removing much of its public housing. And so what you begin to see is a distribution of that low-income housing into the suburban area. And so you begin to see an increase in people living below the poverty level throughout the suburbs. And particularly down in that area you were just describing, that southwest suburban area, Justice, Burbank, that southwest quadrant within Cook County. And a lot of people who moved out of the city moved into those apartments down in that area. Now we're serving them because they happen to live along our bus routes. But you also see a lot more out in West Chicago, in western DuPage County. Significant growth in that area. And you'll notice that we have a paucity of service out there. We really don't have much service in that area at all. What's interesting there is that many of those people, the way in which they get to work, are through these vans that are set up to transport people to work. And so on Monday, you may pay $1 for your ride. By Friday, you're paying $5 or $6 for the same ride to get to and from work. And by the way, the person who transports you is also the person who's arranging for your work. So there's some very interesting things going on in that suburban workplace.
Is this an informal sort of transportation system, or is this like a formal?
It's an informal system that appears to be there. Well, let's put it this way: there is a linkage between the employers and the people providing the transportation.
Okay. What kind of employment is this?
It's generally day labor type of situations. This is the paratransit service area that we provide in addition to fixed route. The darkened areas, the hash marked areas, are the ADA, complimentary ADA paratransit service that we are required to provide by law. The other colored areas are the various contracts that we have either with counties, townships, communities. The areas within the city are the 3 zones that we have for the ADA paratransit. Up in Lake County, you'll see a group of zones. Those are primarily the township-based. And then up at the far end, you see a green area. That's primarily an area where there is an association of the townships that are joined together to purchase service, and we are a sponsor of that service. I'm going to run through a series of slides fairly quickly. We couldn't figure out a really neat way to do this, so you just have to bear with me as we have a series of slides. Over the years, starting 2003, we did a series of restructuring efforts in order to deal with the changes that we knew we needed to do to deal with those legacy systems. And so one of the first ones that we did was in Elgin. And what we were looking at here is we had some very old, very non-productive routes. This area and most of the other areas in Elgin, Aurora, Joliet, and Waukegan, these are what we call pulse points. Everything came to downtown. Now, if you have been to any of these cities, if you go downtown, in most cases, you can fire a cannon and you will not have to worry about hitting anybody. Because most of the downtowns are, with the exception of the government centers, there is not a lot going on. Now, most of these communities are doing a lot to try and revitalize their downtowns, but Walmart has done a pretty good job of making sure that people don't go downtown. Most of the stores are mom and pop stores. They're getting by. They're nice on weekends when there are weekend events, but they're not big employment centers. Yet we continue to serve them. So part of what we've been doing for the past 15 or 20 years as part of our Vision 2020 program is we are going in and looking at that service and trying to get it straightened out. We had some luck here, but we met with some resistance. And so we got what we could the first time around, and we've actually gone back a second time to try and make some changes. The next one that we did was actually in 2005, we did 2 of them. Now, how many of you know anything at all about Evanston, Skokie, Lincolnwood? Okay. We have, most people know that Evanston is sort of an interesting town to deal with. Evanston has an attitude. Okay. Everybody there has an opinion and they'll let you know it. And so it is a very interesting place to try and make change. So we had to find a way to engage the community. And what we did was we came in, we held a series of workshops. We asked people what they wanted their transit system to look like. And we did this in in Evanston, we did it in Skokie, we did it in Lincolnwood, we did it in Wilmette. And the way in which we did it was we asked people to write their opinions on sticky notes. And we had maps, we had our routes up. And they stuck the sticky notes up. And we came back a few weeks later and we had changes to the routes based on the sticky notes. But we left the sticky notes up. And we asked them to come, we asked them to go and comment again. And so now they got a chance to look at what they had written the first time. And now they commented a second time with their sticky notes. Now, they didn't have a microphone to talk about for 5 or 10 minutes. They just were talking with the planner next to the easel with the sticky notes. And they got a chance to go around to all of the maps and all of the schedules and make their comments. We took those away. We came back a third time. So now they've had a chance to get their ideas refined. And now we came back to them, we said, these are the ideas that we want to take for a public hearing. What do you think? And essentially it was, do you like it? You don't like it? What else do we have to improve? So now we took them out for a public hearing. First time we had ever gone to a public hearing where people came out and supported the ideas for the service changes. So we went, whew, wow, this is a great way to do this. So we went out and we did something similar in Fox Valley and in Southwest DuPage, Naperville. Naperville is Evanston without the lake. Very involved community. A lot of people want to let you know what they want, and they're very engaged. They've had their transit system for 30 plus years. You're not going to mess with it. They came out, they gave us their comments. Again, same process. very active governmental leadership. They came with their ideas. And oh, by the way, they wanted to let us know that they've been paying in a lot of money for a lot of years and they didn't have much to show for it. So what were we gonna do for them? So again, how are you gonna redesign this service? What are you going to do? In addition to that, you're the second largest city in Illinois. What is the second largest city in Illinois? The second largest city in Illinois was Aurora. Second largest city in Illinois has no Sunday service, has very little Saturday service. Why? Because we didn't have funding to run the service. We've cut it back. Because the 60s, it was dying. The 70s, there was no money. The 80s, we didn't have any money. The 90s, we didn't get any more money. So here are these people saying, we want service. So now, again, we're out. What kind of service? What do you want us to do? Where do you want to go? They wanted to go to Naperville, because that's where the jobs were. So we had to sit down and design service to get them to Naperville. Spent a lot of time looking at where are the jobs, using a lot of the data. And oh, by the way, back, believe it or not, in 2005, trying to get employment data was very, very difficult. The idea of going to LEHD or going to IDES or somebody else, you go to IDES and ask them for data, they look at you like, you need an act of Congress. We can't release that data to you. And you sit there and go, wait a second, we don't want people's names. We just want to know, where do they work? Where do they live? Where do they work? So it was very difficult, even then, to get decent data that we could use to get down to route planning, route level planning. We could get TAS level data from census data that was 5 years old. And we could match up that sort of data. So we began to look at how could we go and get survey data, what kind of survey data could we start to do ourselves? And we began to do a different kind of user, non-user survey data. We had some consultants working on this with us that were very, very good. One of the other things that we did in this route, and I'm spending a little bit more time on this one just so you understand, because this was a sort of a watershed event for us, because we started to do some things differently here than we had done in other places. In public transit, one of the most important things has always been ridership. You hear about it all the time. CTA's ridership is up, it's down, it's up, it's down. PACE's ridership is up, it's down. Everybody and their brother lives and dies with ridership data. It's nonsense. I can increase my ridership tomorrow. I can increase it up 50 to 100% just by forcing transfers. My ridership in any one of these cities is, I can double it. I just force people to transfer. What's important is the ridership miles, the amount of miles that people actually travel. So in one case here, we were forcing people to transfer to get from the west side of Aurora to Naperville. And oh, by the way, because of the transfer, we were losing about 10 minutes that we could get them to jobs in Naperville. So we cut out the transfer. We lost ridership, cut out the transfer, kept ridership miles. And in a year, we had the ridership back, because we now had a route that people really, really wanted to ride because it was getting into jobs. So we took a gamble, and it worked. So, little thing that was somewhat different. And again, what we did was we broke away from the idea of everybody had to go into downtown in order to get to the other part of town. We bypassed the transit center, we just didn't go there anymore. All right. Next route, this is a route that we ended up doing the North Central Shuttle Service Initiative. We did this because the North Central train line was coming out. I'm not going to say anything about this. This was an absolute disaster. There was no market. They put in a rail line, and it was supposed to be reverse commute. We were supposed to serve the employers along here. We spent a lot of time planning for it. We put some service out for a while. We used CMAQ and JARC money for this. We built it, no one came. It's an example of where the distance from the train station to the employers and the type of jobs and the shifts just didn't work. This, for me, was a repeat of something that we did way back in the 70s, with the early RTA, where we tried to run service from the end of Jefferson Park out to Elk Grove Village. It was a disaster. Today, we run service to Elk Grove Village from Rosemont, and it's spectacular. The difference then was we didn't have frequent enough service. That was the same thing here. We didn't have frequent enough service, and the distances were wrong. So, things you learn. The next one, this was massive. This was internally we called it SoCo-WeCo, South Cook Will County. And this was also a very important area because this is the area that violates every planning principle around. The highest ranked route in PACE's service area is the 352, more than 6,000 rides a day. It shouldn't be doing that well. If you look at all of the planning books, you're supposed to have X number of jobs per square mile. You're supposed to have X number of residences per square mile. They don't talk about the number of poor people per square mile. And they don't talk about the lack of cars per square mile. That's what we've got down in the south suburbs. So, this is a place where if people had a car, the license plate could be, my other car is a bus. Because we are. Okay? And whether it's 352 or 353, this is the place where we carry an awful lot of people. We spend a lot of time getting these routes right. We also had some real Title VI challenges down here. That may sound weird, but we had some legacy routes in here that ran from here to downtown Chicago. And we were under a lot of pressure for duplicating CTA and Metro service. We had express buses running on the expressway. So imagine this. I got the Dan Ryan, I got the Red Line, and I got the IC, and I got the Rock Island. Excuse me, we're not supposed to call it the Rock Island anymore. The Heritage Line, or whichever line we're calling it. Anyway, we got all of this service running in there, and then I'm running a bus right down next to it. Well, the people who live down on the far south side who've had that route since their grandparents got on that bus first, and these kids literally rode it, or these young people rode it as when they were grandchildren. We went in to try and take that one out. That was tough because we had to try and find alternatives. And we ended up designing some service where we ended up really spending time meeting trains. We met them in Hegewisch, we met them at Sibley, we met them at Harvey. We did a much better job of designing our own service so that we met more trains at the Dan Ryan. So we ended up really having to look at that service. The other thing that happened was we were now able, because we had that equipment, we now were able to turn around and start to serve the south suburbs much more thoroughly. We were suddenly able to start pushing more service east-west across 159th Street. 364, Route 364, which operates down on 159th Street, serves no CTA station, no CTA line. It is one of the heaviest routes in the system. All it does is pick up people every single quarter mile of its existence. It goes from the Indiana state line all the way out to Orland Park. And it works the entire way. It's just amazing. And it works picking up people and taking them to work. These people are shoppers. Are workers going to the shops. That's who it serves. Okay? The next one is sort of interesting because historically, today, this is something we did in 2010. Today, the governor and the chairman of DuPage County broke ground on the Western O'Hare access, which is essentially the Elgin O'Hare access. So it's only been 3 years, but this is going to be a major expressway, and we were a participant in the broader study. And the interesting thing here, and this is something else that's been a major part, that if you had told me I was going to live to see this in any state in the Union, I would have told you this is nuts. We were invited by IDOT to be a part of this in planning a transit component of a major highway. That just wasn't part of the mix. Highways were here and transit, we were over here, especially in the suburbs. We were worse than oil and water. We were gasoline and water. You know, we got to float on the top, and if they got a chance, they put a match to us and burned us off. Something happened. I'm going to attribute it to great leadership, insightful leadership, that said, really believed what the research told us in the early part of this century, which was, we can't build our way out of congestion. We have to think our way out of congestion. We have to do some very, very different things. And the tollway came to that way of thinking. IDOT came to that way of thinking. And we have been partners now for at least the last 4 years. And it has been an absolutely great experience for all of us in transit. The other big thing that happened to us was another great experience. We've got somebody here in the group, and I want you to recognize a young planner who I have the privilege of working with, and that's Charlotte O'Donnell down at the end of the table. Charlotte was my lead on the I-355 corridor study. This was a revolutionary study for us because this really also changed the way that we evaluate corridors. Again, in transit, we, like so many other people, had looked at things. We looked at a quarter mile either side of a route. You know, we looked at the population, we looked at the housing, we looked at the shopping, we looked at sort of the traditional things. And we were lucky on this. We got a consultant out of the Northwest, and if any of you are into urban planning and great cities, go to the Northwest. Seriously, they've got their act together out there. I don't care if they're chewing tree bark or whatever. You know, they've got all their zonal boundaries, and they've got all this stuff that bothers a lot of other people in other parts of the world, but they know how to design their cities and they know how to make their cities livable. And we have been fortunate to have a couple of key planners who've come from there to work with us. And one of the major things that they did for us was they got us to really start to evaluate the corridors that we wanted to operate in. And so we were ranking a bunch of the corridors along I-355. And for years I've been saying to my planners, oh, we gotta get service on Higgins Road, we can go fast, we can pick up the people, look at all the residences along here, look at all the shops, I can get into Woodfield in the back, I can get down to, I can get into O'Hare, I got all these people that live out here that work at O'Hare, see, this is you can't beat this with a stick. And these guys came in one day, they looked at me and they said, forget it. I said, what do you mean? He said, it's one of the worst places we could possibly be. And I went, what? What are you talking about? And they said, there's no access. And I said, what do you mean there's no access? And I said, have you driven that road? And I said, yeah. They said, drive it again. But now we want you to look at how often you can go from that neighborhood to our bus stop. Okay, how about every half mile? How about every 3/4 of a mile? Because there were fences. Because you couldn't get there from here. So we began to plan in a very different way. We began to think in terms of walk zones. How could I design routes so that I could get from an area to a bus stop? Radically changed how we began to look at buses. So street rankings are significantly changed. The other thing that we did was we also partnered with IDOT and the RTA for our Bus on Shoulder project, which has been a significant growth in ridership, and I'll show you more about that in just a minute. Should go back just the other one that's there. We also worked with McHenry County. One of the nice things here in the past couple of years is we've been able to work with the county DOTs, and they've turned out to be absolutely great to work with because they're doing a lot on their transit planning as well. And as they go through, they are not only looking at sort of fixed route service, they're looking more at community-based service. And so we're seeing, when I mentioned family of services, they're looking at a lot more of how can I get people around and within communities. So we're looking at things that we're calling caller rides, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a couple of minutes. The other group that we're working with is I-90, was the tollway, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. We also did Lake County this year, and the good news there is we're going to be making changes in December, and we've really had a great working relationship with Lake County DOT, and we've got some significant changes through the middle part of the county, which we really didn't do before. Here's an example of having people who live in the Waukegan area, and we're now worrying about getting them down into the Mundelein area and other parts of the county in order to get to work. This West Cook area is also another area that we have spent a lot of time looking at our own service and really thinking about what and how we're going to do there. So it's really sort of, it's still a work in progress because, you know the game Jenga? Well, that's what you sort of have to think about this part of the region, because you've got routes that are been there. And they made a lot of sense 20 years ago. But it's like the mayor of Lincolnwood said to us at a meeting when we were doing the area up around Evanston and Lincolnwood. We came in for a meeting with him one day and we said, we're thinking about taking this service out. And he looked at us and he said, well, I think I've been waiting for you to come and talk to me because I've been trying to figure out why you've been operating it. Because the people that used to have those jobs are now living out in Buffalo Grove. So we know we've got some of the same sort of thing going on in Cicero and Berwyn and Bellwood, but we're going to have to go and do some of those boards with the yellow stickies again. But this area is going to be a real challenge because we know we still have to have that connectivity through here, because the challenge here is you've got people in Chicago who want to get to the jobs that are just west of those older suburbs. There are jobs in Westchester and out along Manheim Road and up around the southern end of the airport and out through there. And so we still have to have that network of routes that are going to get people there. But we also know we're not going to be doing a lot of heavy lifting on portions of those routes. So it's going to be, how do we design that service? What do we make it look like? And that's one of the challenges that our principal planner who's working this area is really trying to do. I mean, he's done some very creative things with what he did with North Avenue and what he did with 18th Avenue and some of those, but he's still got a lot of heavy lifting to do with some of these other routes. So that's why it's there and it's not quite complete yet. And then we also have the Northwest Cook restructuring. Again, same sort of thing. You've got old routes that are there. And when you go to, let me tell you, when you go to take out something like in Park Ridge, there's holy ground, and then there's really holy ground. And when you go to take out some service with people who've been there who've been riding your buses for 30 and 40 years, and they used it to get to work every day of their life, and there aren't that many of them left around, when you're going to go take that route out, you better have a really good alternative for them. So call-in rides and that specialized service begin to be something you really have to think about how you're going to put in place. So that sort of leads us to this notion of this different kind of service, this flexible routing. What do we have? How can we do things like bus on shoulders? What are our suburban operations going to look like? And what does mobility management really mean? Because it's not sort of what we've seen public transit for in the cities for years. It's a very different looking type of service. And so from what we're looking at, we're essentially saying we can use flexible and a personalized option, give as many people as possible an alternative to the car. So we have traditional van pool. We have what we call employer shuttles. We have Metro feeders. Now, a Metro feeder means we leave a van pool at a train station. Someone comes to work every day. They're the designated driver. They pick up the van at the Metro station, and a bunch of other people pile into that van, and they go to their site of employment. Now, we also then have what we call the Advantage van. There are places that are called sheltered workshops. People with disabilities go to work every day. Right now, under the law, a person going down to get a six-pack has the same right to call for a trip as does a person going to get picked up to go for a job. Now, you're allowed to set aside a number of subscription trips. So you can say 50% of my trips are going to be subscriptions. I can use it to get people to work, I can use it to get people to medical, I can use it to get people to school. And it was sort of on a first come, first served. So when the ADA law went in, you were one of the first people to call, you got your spot, and you held it for all these years. God love you, you're golden. Okay? Everybody else, hey, you're in the pool. You try to call in, and that's why you've got people getting up at 5:30 in the morning, calling for a trip the following day, right? So one of our staff a number of years ago came up with this idea. Why don't I go to these sheltered workshops and say to them, you have to get your employees to work every day. Why don't we give you the van? You hire the driver. We'll provide the insurance, we'll provide the fuel, we'll even train the driver. The advantage is that it takes all of those people out of that mix every morning. So it's worked very, 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 very well. And it's a great program, and now it's being copied in a number of other places around the country. We've also created a thing called Call and Ride, which is a specialized program. We'll talk a little bit more. We have general public paratransit, which is dial a ride. I already showed you the map of that earlier. We have some tailored express services that we did. We don't do this so much anymore, but when we're called upon, we do it. It's if we get an employer that really wants and they're willing to help pay for it, we will run some special service. We're not allowed to compete with the private carriers, so we don't do this as much as we used to. But the best example of this is UPS. We have service where UPS came to us a number of years ago, and we did a partnership with them where we run service to the cache out in Hodgkins, and we take their people to work every day. They help pay for the service, they buy tickets for their employees, and we run the service to get them there at their critical shift times. And so part of what we're looking at there is we're leveraging existing corridors more efficiently. We also have the distinction, one of the few transit systems in the country, where we are the ride share and the van pool coordinators. Most places around the country, this is done by the MPO. We're doing it because nobody else wanted to, and the other thing is we found it to be an advantage because we use ride share as a way to build into van pools. We get a bunch of people who are using calling up getting ride share, and you get a bunch of people and we eventually say, hey, would you like to form a van pool? And at some point people go, oh yeah, that's a good idea. So it's part of what we do. Yes?
You guys have heard of how PACE's, at least their union contracts are different from CTAs, and how oftentimes there's contractors which operate PACE routes, and it's tends to be a very complex system of overlapping contracts and overlapping service areas between the independent contractors and PACE staff itself and other providers. How is it that some of these more tailored services, rideshares, van pools, and other programs are able to function within such an intricate, the overlapping system of agreements and contracts and
That's the beauty of the system. We have 9 separate labor contracts. Each one of our divisions has its own labor contract. So we could have probably years ago put them all together under one master agreement, but it just didn't make any sense to do that. Why give a union that much control? See, because the way labor law is done, the unions have what's called 13C protection. The federal law essentially gives the union the ability to control your capital. If the union can't get something at the bargaining table, it can hold out and try to stop you from getting your federal money to buy your bus or rail or your facilities. They just go to the labor department and they put a hold on your capital with the idea that you would then be forced to come back and give them what they want. So by having 9 separate contracts, each coming due at different times, the union could never get a stranglehold on PACE. So, and the other thing is that because of that, PACE has the ability, PACE never gave up the right to contract out service. Unlike the CTA, where the CTA cannot bid out its service, PACE can put any of its routes out for bid at any time, which is part of what we do. So we can choose to operate service ourselves, or we can choose to go and get a private contractor to come and operate it for us. For the smaller service, for the paratransit service, in many cases, it just makes sense to have the private carriers operate that for us because they are able to get part-time work. They're able to get part-timers who can fill in the shifts that work best for that kind of service. So that's part of how that particular system works. It's not as complicated as it sounds.
by 9 service contracts, is that geographic based? Is that?
Yes. Each one of them is out of each one of our 9 divisions. Okay? So let me just very quickly explain call-in rides. So a call-in ride is a demand response, usually using a single vehicle. It's a defined service area of 4 to 10 square miles. The operator has a phone to accept calls, does not accept phone calls while he or she is driving. We know this because we monitor what time the call comes in and because we are tracking the vehicle at all times. So we do go and match up the location and the time that the phone call comes in. Very soon we are going to have a tablet or pad type of device that will allow us to definitely make sure that that doesn't happen. We also have it designed so that there's a scheduled connection to a bus or a rail, and it can also serve as a collector-distributor service to long-distance transit and or community circulators. So these are the existing call and ride zones. You can see that they're spread throughout the 6-county region. The most successful was really sort of the first one down in Joliet. This actually replaced a very poorly performing fixed route. One of the other ones, one of the newest ones, is up here in Lake County. This is sort of fascinating because it actually comes off College of Lake County and actually allows a couple of fixed routes to work fairly effectively. We also have some very successful expressway-based services, the bus on shoulder service. Now, this service had been around for a long time, and we used to get caught in traffic, and our on-time performance here was somewhere in the 50% range. I mentioned we got support from IDOT and the RTA to put this service together. We actually had to get state legislation to allow us to run on the shoulder. The state legislature supported us, gave us a test phase, and we are actually running under that test phase right now. We have to report to them, and hopefully they're going to let us extend that and run a bunch of other places. So here you can see when we went and started to run on the shoulder, you see what happened with the ridership. It just went through the roof. We are now facing a real dilemma because we're at about 1,000 rides a day. We're running out of park and ride locations, places for people to put their cars while they get on the bus. We are actually having to order new buses in order to be able to make this work for additional service. That's the bus. The unique thing about it is we worked with the state police to get the markings done on this bus. Essentially, it says that we're authorized to run on the shoulder, and you are not. The first couple of weeks, the police were fairly aggressive in monitoring this. We had one other bus company that thought that they could do it. After they got their first citation, they realized they couldn't. We also, we've been very fortunate that there have been no significant accidents. There has been one minor fender bender where I don't even call it a fender bender, it'd be more like a scrape. A car started to come into the lane, looked up, saw the bus, and luckily our driver stopped. And so we didn't even trade paint, I don't think. One of the things we've done on a regular basis, because we have a captive audience, is we survey these riders on a regular basis, and one of the things we learned from them is they want more service. They also want to be able to drink on the bus, but we don't think that's going to happen. That was way down here, and you'll notice I left it off the bottom of the slide. So they wanted more AM trips and more PM trips.
Is there Wi-Fi?
Yes, there is.
There is.
They had asked for that, and we got it, and they seem to love it. We get regular comment, and by the way, this is a group that is very vocal. They let us know when something's working and when it's not. This is also a group that said to us, "Hey, when you get this Ventra thing working, we want a pass that lets a premium pass." And so we went to our board and got permission to create a premium monthly pass for them. So, because what they used to have to do is they used to have to use their regular pass and then pay an additional upcharge for the premium fare. So now they can just get on tap with their new premium fare. The other thing we're working on is arterial rapid transit. This is a major project. This is what we're going to live and die with in the future. I talked earlier about when you sort of the Jenga experience, when you take out that poorly performing service, you have to put something in its place that's really going to catch people's attention. So that's what we're going to be doing. It operates like a rail. There are stations, not stops. There's some unique identifiers. It's going to be easy and convenient. Faster service, showcase technology. There's in this area, it's going to be very difficult to get a distinctive running way, but we're going to try and do some things with road markings and things of that sort. You'll see some of this in downtown Chicago. You've already seen the jump, as it's called. And Ashland Avenue is going to have one if the neighbors realize what they're going to get. If they get over their fear. Again, go to the West Coast. These guys have this thing knocked. It's working, and it works great. Your arterial corridor, this is the long term. This is what, when it's all said and done, I'm not allowed to say when I'm all said and done, right, Charlotte? You guys are tired of hearing me say that. In a few years, the long-term network will be there. It'll be 24 key travel corridors. It'll be over 600 miles. It's part of our Vision 2020 goals, and we're starting out with the Milwaukee corridor, and then we're going to do the Dempster corridor after that. Milwaukee corridor is about 7 miles long. It's going to go from Jefferson Park CTA station to Golf Mill Shopping Center. There will eventually be service north of Golf Mill will operate as a local service. The Dempster Street ART will be 15 miles. That will go from Davis Street Station to the CTA station at O'Hare to Kiss and Fly. Now this is going to be interesting because by the time the Dempster Street ART comes online, we're hoping that the new Kiss and Fly and parking lot and everything else may hopefully be in place, which will give us a real nice presence on the western edge of this thing. So we're looking forward to that. The other big thing that we've got going is a partnership with the Tollway. This is the I-90 transit service, and this we've already expanded our 600 series route. It's now bi-directional. The 610 runs in both directions. We've got new routes coming on, the 604, 605, 607, which is the Elgin to Schaumburg Express, and 608, which will be in Addison to Schaumburg. We're going to put in 3 call-in rides. We've already talked a little bit about them, but one in Barrington, one in North Schaumburg, and one in Des Plaines. So here's what it'll look like. I hope this works. I always have trouble with animations. So those are that's the 600 and 610. That's the new service that's going to be coming in. That'll go all the way to Randall Road. That'll be the new route that comes from Randall Road to Schaumburg. This is something that we're trying to do, is to create these suburb-to-suburb routes, because everything doesn't have to tie all the way in. These are the 2 north-south routes. These routes are some things we learned from that I-355 corridor study that I mentioned earlier. So stuff we learned about a couple of years ago, we now can implement now as part of the bigger plan. These are the call-in rides. These are a couple of local routes that are coming out of Elgin that'll come up and be part of this network. So what you end up with is an I-90 corridor that is a suburban network in and of itself. One of the interesting things here is that there are, Charlotte, help me on this, there are as many people working in this corridor.
For the projections for 2040, this corridor is going to have as many jobs as Chicago Loop will. And so currently we're only capturing 2% from public transit, whereas the Loop's capturing like 57% of employees on transit. So we're going to try to mirror that, because we know that the capacity by 90 long term isn't going to be able to handle those loads.
So now you begin to see why you want to design a network of routes or a subset of routes And again, think about how this is designed. This is designed to be at the western end of the blue line. And it's also designed to be coming through a fairly densely populated suburban corridor. Now, there's something else that's fairly interesting about this one, and that is these two intersections are interesting because, again, IDOT has been working, the Tollway has been working with us on the design of these two intersections. Interesting thing is, they are on their property. The top one, we never get off the road. This is a slip. These are ramps. We slip off onto the side of the road. We go into a bay. People come from the park and ride lot down onto a station adjacent to the highway, get on our bus. We accelerate on the shoulder to come back up, and eventually we get back at highway speeds. We eventually get over into the left lane, over onto the left shoulder, and we run all the way to Rosemont in our own unobstructed lane. So, at this point, we are a pure express bus. And so we can now begin to really think about getting express service in a corridor. So when you begin to think about, this is, suddenly you're not talking about your grandfather's bus. You're talking about buses that are running at highway speeds, able to make many turns, and we are able to carry a significant number of people in this corridor. So now, why does a highway engineer want transit on his or her highway? There's a bus that's carrying 50 people just took 50 cars out of the mix. And if I can get 6 trips in one direction in the peak, I've just taken 300 cars out of the mix. It suddenly begins to make sense. There's a value to having a transit vehicle or transit vehicles in their flow. The other one is at Illinois 25. This is completely in their intersection. We don't have to get off the road. We just have to use their intersection in order to make it work. A couple quick things. Mobility, call center. This is going to be a big change for us, centralize all of the calls. This is our operational model. Right now, the customer calls the center. We dispatch to the carriers. What this will happen now is we will take the calls. We will dispatch to all of the different carriers. A couple things that are going on, database opportunities, again, because we now have the ability to look at data in a very different way. We use software to be able to look at what's happening with all of our ridership. More than 50% of our buses now have automatic passenger counters. We also now have, all of our buses also have Ventra. We're getting all sorts of data off our buses, both through this, and I'll show you the other stuff in just a minute. All right. We also have the ability now to go and look at what we call best of service. So we now can go in and looking at all of the different service types that we could possibly provide. We go in and evaluate different types of service in different locations. The other thing that we've been able to do is back when we were dealing with the, remember when the red line was getting ready to shut down? We went and we looked at our survey data, and we analyzed the routes that we're serving the red line. And we figured out how many people were going north of Roosevelt Road. And then we made a decision about what we were going to do. And so here's an example of the sort of data that we have on a regular basis. Now, you know, we're much more interested in the demographics because that's telling us about the type of service that we need to provide. So again, here we were looking at, these were the type of fares that we were experiencing. And then we looked at every single stop, every single route that came into 95th Street. So we knew exactly what the impact of the red line shutdown was going to be on our service. And then this is something that we did for the Lake Cook TMA. People kept on saying, oh, we need bigger bus, we need a bigger bus, we need a bigger bus. So we went and we looked at every single trip where we had standees. And we made an assessment that we only needed a bigger bus on one day out of an entire period. So we went back to the employer and we said, we're trying to understand this. You want us to put a bigger bus out there. Why? And I said, because our employees are telling us that we need a bigger bus. And we said, you guys are in business. Would you make a decision based upon anecdotal or upon fact? And from then on, they said, when we get this sort of a request, we'll come back to you for the facts. We said, thank you. No problem since. The other thing is, when we look at the routes, and most people are not aware that we have this level of data, we are looking at boarding and alighting by segment. So we know where people get on, where they get off. And why does this become important? Because remember earlier I was talking about where and how we can trim, how if I need to begin to start to pull a route back, or if I'm going to change a route by time of day. Now I know where and when and how I can get away with it. And now I can go out and meet the public. I can show the public, this is what's been going on for the past year, 2 years, 3 years. So we have dashboards for monitoring real-time status. And this is some of the data we had last week. And a certain party insisted that I prepare and get ready to send my presentation, so I couldn't give you real-time data. I came close, but this is what we look like as of last week. So you can see that the Ventura ridership was going up last week, and it continues to go up. We're over 30,000 rides just on our service, which is pretty good. And we're able to track by division. We're also looking at the Ventura with our by time of day. You can see this is a perfect example of our system. This is what our system looks like. We are a peak-based system. We carry people to work. And the bottom graph really shows it. And then this is a picture of what our future service eventually looks like. This is our Vision 2020. Community-based service, a lot of transportation centers, the line haul express routes, line haul arterial routes, line haul bus improvements, etc. And then the last thing, if any of you are interested, this is a website that we have up. You want to go and look at anything about us, ridership, real-time ridership. It's right there on the bottom. HTTP maps.pacebus.com, flex viewers, PACE system. This is the over there on the left, that's the layer list, and you can go and turn those things on and off and look at just about anything that's in there. You can see our facilities, where they're located. You can see our ridership. You can see the last 3 quarters of data. And if you have questions, the crazy person who developed this, his name is on there, it's George Katsambas, he's our GIS guru. And he's having way too much fun with this. So, and with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions. And I guess the best way for me to explain that is you can see that we have examples of all the different stuff we've been doing. And maybe now you can understand that the secret to succeeding with suburban transit is that you don't do things that threaten those who don't have your best interest at heart, which is why you can laugh at living practice.
So we have a little bit of time for questions. We're about, it's at 4:25 right now, it's supposed to end at 4:30, but we'll just kind of keep it going.
Yes.
I just want to understand that CTA uses their bus transfer system as a means of informing supervisor actions from a remote location. Is that also something that PACE does?
Yes.
But how does that differ from on-street supervision?
PACE's system is a radio-based. We use a system that was developed originally by Rockwell, and our system holds every minute. The system itself is self-reporting every time it goes by a transfer point, and it also reports every time it opens its doors. So we are accurate to within 10 meters when the bus is standing still. We have a website called WebWatch, so if you go on our website, you can go to WebWatch and you can track all of our buses. We give you actual time for the current bus at any of our bus stops, and we give you scheduled time for the next 2 buses. Our system is actually older than the CTA's system, but our system was difficult for people to use because we did not have the Google feed. We did not have the GTFS until about 18 months ago, and that was because of our scheduling software. Our scheduling software is we didn't see the need in our scheduling software to put in the distance between stops, which is what's required in order to make the GTFS work. So we do that now, and that's why we're now able to. That's why the RTA, for instance, is able to now report on ours as well as the CTAs.
I guess I was more kind of interested in what changes with on-street supervision versus remote supervision of drivers and buses.
We tend to do mostly remote supervision because of the size of our area, and so what we do is when our buses get to be 5 minutes late, the dispatch console gets on the screen. He gets a yellow. When he gets if he gets to be 10 minutes late, he gets a red, and he gets an audible tone. So and at that point the driver the dispatcher has to take an action that has to be logged. Because the system won't let him just simply ignore it. He has to take an action. Question in the back.
Yeah, I was wondering if this gives any sort of preferential treatment to low-income areas where the need for service might be greater. Just, with limited resources, if you had to choose between two routes, would you perhaps choose to serve an area that had a higher low-income population?
I wouldn't say that we have a policy to do that. I would say that because we tend to get greater ridership out of the lower income area, we would probably end up serving it. When you look at the need for the service, I don't think we look at it based upon income. We look at it much more in terms of getting people to work. That would be a bigger driver for us. Because that tends to meet our core mission much more. Yeah.
Oh, sorry,
I
go
would
ahead.
kind of follow on that question, sorry. So when you're talking more about like cross-county routes, for example, that are getting maybe low-income people who live in an area to jobs on the other side of the county, like you mentioned the Waukegan to Mundelein connection, there's areas in between those places that don't really, I've at least heard anecdotally, that don't really want public transit in their neighborhoods. Thinking like Green Oaks and some of these kind of in unincorporated areas.
Yeah.
How do you deal with?
They get it whether they want it or not. We're taking the shortest route.
That's what I figured.
Yeah. Well, we don't have time for bias. I mean, it comes down to just getting people where they have to get as quickly as you can get them there. Yes.
Great presentation, a lot of information coming at us. So I just wanted to clarify with the ART, are you guys modifying current routes, or are these new routes being installed by 2020, 2030?
Some of it will be modifying existing routes. Some of it will be taking old routes out and putting a newer, higher, faster service in on top of it. And that's going to be part of the challenge, is what that service is going to look like. We just had a discussion the other day, if we put service on Harlem Avenue, and you're going to run that service every 10 minutes, south of Lake Street, where we run, all you're really going to do is you're just going to change the distance from stops every half mile to maybe stops every 3/4 mile. But you're still going to have 10-minute service. Now, once you get north of Lake Street, for a portion of that route, we're going to be running on top of the CTA. They're probably still going to want to run their local service, but at that point, we're still going to probably run our service, but we're going to, at that point, maybe we stop every mile. But the big thing for us is we're trying to get from Charlotte, help me, 187th on the south to where, Waukegan Road on the north, on Harlem?
I'm not sure.
Pardon?
I'm not sure.
Okay. But it's a long distance.
Okay, thank you.
Alex?
If there is some integration with the service boards, like is being discussed in the project, cars. Would that mean business as usual for PACE, or would it sort of make things better or make things worse? I guess specifically in terms of service timing, but you can sort of expand on it if you want to.
I think when cooler heads prevail, people are going to realize that New York is New York, and Chicago is Chicago. My reason for saying, Alex, you're familiar with New York, so you know that one of the biggest differences is that the MTA of New York does not have a significant suburban presence the way this area does. There is a suburban operation that's part of the MTA, but nowhere near the suburban bus operation that there is here. So I think when people sit down and look at it, they're going to have to say, okay, what do we do with the suburban bus operation? So I think it'll take them a little bit of time to figure it out. But as I said earlier, my staff doesn't like me to say it after I'm gone. Yes.
Yes, that 55 bus on shoulder is running parallel to the Heritage Corridor on Metro.
Yeah.
Has the increased service on bus on shoulder affected, how has that affected ridership on Metro's parallel service?
As far as we know, there hasn't been any effect. The reason being that much of the ridership on the Heritage Corridor is still significantly south. It's in Lockport, Lamont, and Joliet. And we are primarily in Plainfield, Romillville, Bolingbrook, and Burr Ridge. If anything, we have probably had some effect on the BNSF ridership for the people who have a long commute all the way up to BNSF. But as far as we know, nothing to the Heritage Corridor. We put in a late evening trip to provide a lifeline trip for the people on the Heritage Corridor, and I don't think we've had anybody who's really used the service.
Great. Well, thank you so much for coming.